This is EdTech People, a podcast where we get to meet those working in EdTech, exploring their journeys, roles and insights. You can catch up on our previous episodes at any time by searching for us wherever you get your podcasts or visiting our website at www.edtechpeople.co.uk. We're always on the lookout for guests, so if you're interested in coming on the podcast, please follow the link on our website and let us know. So on this episode of EdTech People, I'm delighted to welcome Chris Byers. Chris, welcome along onto the podcast this evening.
Good evening, Matthew. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So it's great to have somebody on the podcast that a lot of people will know, perhaps not you, but perhaps the organisation that you have founded and that you work for at the moment is Edugeek. But I'm really excited today to get to know you a bit more and explore that journey and that to see how we've got where we are with EdTech in schools.
Yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting conversation, I think, Matthew, because it is quite long-winded in places, I think. And what we'll do, we'll go right back to the beginning and then take it from there. We'll go through the Vector and NGFL days, then when they were killed off when did the Conservatives get 2010, I think, and they killed Vector stone dead. It's one of the first things they did. And moving on to where we are now, especially regarding academy groups and things like that. So yeah, we start off pre-1998, because what we're going to be talking about started in 1998. Mostly IT in schools and ICT provision was on a school-by-school basis, whatever the school wanted in at the time. So some schools had RM networks in, some small RM networks. Some schools had very little. Some schools still had like Acorn Archimedes and the odd BBC knocking around, whatever it was to support the curriculum they were doing at the time. And then so Labour came in 1997, and a year later, they founded the National Grid for Learning project and Vector. They were basically almost, I won't say going hand in hand, but they were kind of linked. So the National Grid for Learning, or NGFL, what it did, it was divided the country up into regions. So you had the Southwest, Southeast London, Northwest and Cumbria, and they were all granted what they called a Regional Broadband Consortium. And the Regional Broadband Consortium's job was to connect schools to the internet. And so everybody went away, and each region will be allocated funds as part of the NGFL project. It was kind of split in two, the NGFL. So they had the Grid for Learning, which was establishing the internet connections within schools. I mean, high-speed internet connections, largely a lot better than what you get in the home. And every region was left to sort itself out, left to its own devices to find out the best, most effective way that they could do this. Because I was in Lancashire, we had Clio, which was the Cumbria Lancashire Education Online. And when I got to my first school in 2000, I think we had 128k ISDN connection for the entire school. And the school was quite fortunate. They had an old RM network, and it was so old it was running on Token Ring. I don't know if you remember Token Ring at all. If anybody's watching this and doesn't know, just please Google it, because it'll take too long to explain. But it's another way of networking computers, which involve terminators and not all machines be able to speak at once, and a lot of other faff. So yeah, whilst the RBCs were connecting up the schools were also given a grant to buy IT kit into schools. Initially, I'm not sure how it was in the early days, because I was out of the decision-making loop here, but it was, and I think this was established later on, that you had to provide X amount of computers per pupils. And I seem to remember 2003, maybe a bit later than that. I think it was 6 or 7 to 1. And just as a cribbage here, some of the notes I've taken, the UK is now 1.4 computers per pupil nationally. That was from an article I found on the University of Edinburgh's site, and that was in 2015. So it may have got, I won't say 1 to 1, but pretty close to it now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're calculating all the tablets and phones and things in that as well. But yeah, so the schools were given lots and lots of money to put in networks. And in the early days, there wasn't that much choice. So you had RM, Vigeland, and there was a couple of other companies providing as well. The big boys weren't in there yet, so your HPs, Dells, and everybody else, nobody was offering educational discount. So for the first few years, you were left to go to either RM, Viglin, or one of these other companies that were supplying into schools and actually fitting the network, setting them up for you. And as you know, RM still has its Pass Connect system. Viglin had ClassLink, I think it was. I was using Viglin. Um, and that was almost a mishmash of other people's software put in a wrapper. So we were using Net Support Manager from Net Support, so something called ImageCast, which was allowed you to image your PCs. And it was all well and good, but we only had a classroom of 30 computers and this old RM network, which I retired the year later. Um, then, as part of the progress as this was going on, we got our first NGFL connection, and I went from 128k to 10 meg. And because it's so hilly here in the northwest, we decided to go for microwave links. So all the schools were linked wirelessly. And it worked really, really well, and it was scalable. So after a while, I think we went up to, I think it must be close to 100 meg a couple of years later on the wireless. And while all this was going on, what would also happen is, well, it had several kind of drawbacks having the regions all running themselves. One of those was everything was centralized. And it wasn't a problem in the early days, so it's centralized, like a lot of people have now, where they go for and they have a cloud filtering solution. It was like that, but run by the RBCs. And as the years went on, that kind of got a bit inflexible because YouTube came along, and then schools wanted to use YouTube. The RBCs didn't want them to use YouTube, and then it started to get a bit squiffy. And even before the end of the RBCs and the NGFL project, schools were going their own way with filtering. And yeah, we got on well with Smoothwall for many years, and we both knew each other from our early days, and we can see it from them just how it scaled. You know, schools suddenly went, hang on, we've got really, really good internet connections, but we can't do much with them. And yeah, it got, what's the best way of putting this? It got awkward, I think, is the best way to put it.
It's an interesting point though, Chris, because it's still running parallel to that in some different ways, even today, isn't it? You know, you've still got I don't know about up your end, but you've still got these councils running large swaths of the school networks in some areas, and you still got schools that even 100 meg. Some schools that I know and work with still don't have the pleasure of that, nor do they really understand the functionality that they could be getting from it if they move to other solutions like Smoothwall or that perhaps and they get bundled with. So a lot of these things have moved on, but perhaps not as much as what we'd perhaps hope.
Oh, indeed, yeah. It's well, you're saying about the regions. Yeah, I mean, there's three I've got noticed down here. So London Grid still exists, and they're doing really well. And you've got the Southwest Grid for Learning, you've got Southeast Grid for Learning still there, and I think there may be a couple of others, but they really are just well, apart from London Grid, who does a whole raft of things. I don't know if you've ever talked to them. They've got a huge setup and a huge lot of offerings. It's not just internet connectivity as well. But for everybody else, it does seem to be that they kind of hung on as an ISP almost.
Yeah.
I know Southwest Grid for Learning is doing a lot of different stuff as well. I'm not sure about the Southeast, but you don't really get to hear about them now because everybody's on different connections with schools, broadband, EXA, or whoever they might be on, and they're running their own affairs now. Interestingly, I do have it noticed down here, is London Grid actually on the trademark for National Grid for Learning now?
Yeah, I actually there was a news story from London Grid for Learning. So I work with schools in London, but I know LGFL are actually well outside of London as well. Schools in Wolverhampton, Worcestershire, where I work, are using them as well. But they did revive the National Grid for Learning name. And there was some talk about them using that, but I'm not sure where it went. But there was some stories on their website where there was on social media where the runs it all was saying we're going to revive the NGFL name, and there's also one for HGL as well, Hearts Grid for Learning, That's I don't know if that was one of the original regions, but they've taken a similar monkey to other areas, and but that's not. I'm pretty sure that's a private business now. Around here, we've got Dudley Grid for Learning, so I don't think they're the same as like the regional ones, but there's certainly council-led ones that have taken a similar approach that are still in play. In fact, the Dudley Grid for Learning around here is still run by RM, and I know the contract's up this year, I believe. So there's a lot of people that are still only just coming to see. I'm talking to quite a few schools who are like, so we can actually move away from this and make our own decisions.
Yes.
Want to do, and that's really new for them.
Yeah, I mean, you do get a lot of freedom running it yourself, I think. And this kind of probably ties in with where we are now as well, especially with regards to academy groups, because they have that freedom, and they can do it as well, depending on the size of the academy group. Some are small, some are big. Um, but they will generally, it'll almost an RBC model. They'll centralize everything. So you'll have a centralized support team. You may have a few people out in the schools, but it's generally centralized as in they're all on the same platform. They're all using Google or Office 365, something like that. They'll all be on similar hardware. They're getting the bulk buy discounts and everything. So yeah, and good luck to them. I think so. I do have the stats here because it's now 81.9% of high schools are now in academy groups.
Right. Okay.
44.2% of primaries, which is 43.5% of all schools are now in academy groups. And but it's similar to, I don't know if you've ever dealt with the US, the school district model they have out there.
I'm aware of it. I'm mostly aware from it from people like Net Support or Senso who have gone out of there and are using that kind of terminology. But in
Yeah.
terms of um, I know it's similar to councils, but they go all in, don't they? They're like their whole thing. They have to buy into the same model, don't they, for their school districts?
Yeah, because all the IT is run at district level. So
Yeah.
it's all the same for all of the schools there. I mean, some schools, again, like academy groups, some school districts are small. You may only have like 5, 10 schools in it. Some can be huge with hundreds of it, or maybe many dozens. If you go to New York and places like that, big cities will have big school districts. Um, but again, they didn't have the advantages the British schools had because they didn't have an NGFL program. So the amount of computers it's a lot of bring your own device though. Oh,
Yes.
bring your own Apple device, should I say? Because everybody's mad on Apple out there.
Yeah.
Never, I say I've never quite got that one, but I've never been an Apple fan. I've used Apple Kit before, and I don't mind it, but I'm not an Apple fanboy as such. But yeah, American schools are very, very different with regards to that. And it was another thing that the NGFL had as well, that with the centralization. So, and it was strange because companies weren't stepping up to offer their services. So Sophos was almost universal throughout the UK during the NDFL days. They gave huge discounts and it was everywhere. And then lots of people went, oh, we don't like this, later on when schools were starting to splinter off. But now a lot of schools are back on Sophos again. So it just goes to show. And they, to be honest, to be fair to Sophos, they put in the commitment over the years as well. They've always stood by schools. It's always been one of their core audiences.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember when I started. It must have been about 2006, 2007 when I started working in schools, and uh, you could walk into any of the schools in the local area, and they would have standard uh, bits of kit that were supplied by the county council. So that would be your Sophos. That would be your same filtering at each location. Back end systems were all tied into the same platforms. And as you say, it's been one of the exciting things since then to see the emergence of new companies and new technology and new providers that has been enabled from that breaking away from it. And I think when you're talking about the multi-academy picture as well, that's a really interesting thing to delve into. So I was meeting, I won't say the name of the trust, but it's a very large trust, 50 plus schools the other day who are fully Google, and their journey to onboarding schools into them is very prescriptive. You're going to be this, you're going to have this is what we're going to do. lucky enough to work with trusts that are just forming. In fact, that's what I was doing today. And again, they're going into this system where, okay, we're going to form this, we're going to align to this. But a lot of trusts still, some of the smaller trusts, so some like 6 to 10 schools, are still very much about the ethos of each school keeping their own image, their own community, their own decision making.
Yes.
And then that third number, they tend to realise that that's not going to work, and they need to standardise because that's where you get the benefits of the bulk buys and stuff. Like, it's still, I'm still on the fence of it a little bit because whilst operationally I can get behind all being on the same platform, all being Google or Microsoft, sometimes it is at the detriment to a school that joins and is using that particular service that they've already got embedded really, really well. And does that mean it's a barrier for them benefiting from joining the trust because they have to almost go back to basics a little bit? And I guess we never had that with these area groups because every school in the area was on that system.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our members did say, especially when the academy group started kicking off, was we're running this. They want us to run that. And it's quite handy that a lot of the members on there were actually putting each other's minds at rest. They're saying actually it is actually a better move compared to what you're running, because it was a hodgepodge. I mean, yeah, everybody had servers on board, and this is something that we're going to move on to in a minute as well. I think is the cloud and how that changed what went on in schools. But yeah, so everybody gets protective about their own things. Um,
They do.
they do. I mean, a good example was when Office 365 came out, and we had a lot of members saying, "But we've got an Exchange server, and we've got this, and we don't want to do this and put it there." And there's me and a couple of older guys talking in the background, and we're going, and I'd been running Exchange servers for 10 years by that point, and it's like if somebody else is going to take the responsibility for running this thing, go for it, because anybody who's ever run an Exchange server or an email server will tell you it's not the happiest of existences. There's a lot of work involved, and if things go wrong, they tend to stay wrong for a very long time.
Horrible would be the word that I would use. And like you, and I had to run them. I, it's an interesting thing because sometimes IT technicians in school get lumbered, and I want to know your opinion on this, tying into what you were just saying, as being quite protectionism, of their networks and how they've got it set up. And then obviously these changes come in, and there's new things such as cloud and moving on to those online systems. I still find people that are really anti these changes and these systems, and I'm sure you know people of that ilk as well. Generational thing? Is it from being held responsible for things back in the day, and losing that control means they fear uh, how they might be held accountable for things, or are they right? Is this cloud agenda a good thing?
I think, especially with IT, like you said, there is a fear of change, but with IT especially, it's a case of the cloud was really disruptive technology, and it wasn't one of those disruptive technologies that all of a sudden, like the iPhone, that things change overnight. All of a sudden, the way phones are used, the way people get information has changed. That's a really disruptive technology, but it wasn't disruptive in a disruptive way, if that makes sense. It's a case of you just had to go out and buy an iPhone or a smartphone, and all of a sudden you had access to all these features. If you didn't have one, you could still make phone calls, which is great. Um, and some of so yeah, the cloud I think was a disruptive technology, but it was very slow. I remember we kind of went to the cloud by accident at Edugeek. I think we started about 2008, 2009. We had Dropbox. We were using Dropbox as a cloud storage solution at the time, and it was great. And then we signed up. I think we were on Google first, and we signed up for Office 365, and that really was a game changer. All of a sudden, think your work follows you around. Nobody thinks about it these days. Nobody ever thinks. I was going to mention this when it came to laptops for teachers, and it was great because every teacher wanted a laptop, but it was really hard to get the information off it and onto your network if you had large amounts. And it's one of those that the cloud really has changed things. And I feel sorry for a lot of companies, especially places like the Bet Show, who are solely cloud focused. It's very important, but it's not sexy. It's really hard to sell the cloud, and all you've got is pictures on your stand.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, it's one of those that I do like it. I do like it a lot. All the cloud-based services we've got, 365. I think we've got a couple of other things we plug into. I couldn't imagine working without them now, to be honest.
It's interesting that you say like around working without them. I've got 24 schools before September to move to the cloud. A lot of those schools have still got local servers. A lot of those schools have. A few are merging these and or moving into fully cloud. So there's elements of that, but there are still schools around that haven't embraced that. So I always forget sometimes that a major selling point of going to the cloud is that access anywhere to
Yes.
any time, and it's still transformational to some people that they do that. So I think we still mustn't forget that sometimes, that it's particularly if you haven't got, and we know the largest concentration of technical staff in education is in secondary rather than primary.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
quite a few of the primaries are left behind as a result, and they still haven't benefited that. And then you've got the flip side with secondaries, where some of their requirements make cloud quite difficult to fully achieve. But I'd be surprised to come across a secondary that doesn't allow cloud storage and hasn't embraced that, or Intune or Chromebooks. But no, there are still plenty of primaries out there that don't do that. So yeah, it's always a thing where I have to remind it. I'm selling it, for want of a better term. Actually, a sales point is, did you know you can go home and work on what you was working on in school? It's interesting. In the last podcast I did earlier on this week, I was chatting with Phil, who works for a trust, and we was talking about laptops and staff access to these things, and he was raising a concern that uh, have we encouraged people to work more from home by giving them this full cloud access and by giving them the opportunity to use laptops wherever? And have we caused an expectation for not only for teachers to work from home, but for IT staff to support it at any time in any way?
Um, yeah, I think, yeah, like you say, especially with COVID, it was, and that was the real rush to the cloud, I think. Before then, we, and there is like an assumption that people are all doing the same thing, and generally they're not. And a lot of our members, when the lockdowns first started, said we had been planning to go, but by God, we need to go now. And the rush for cloud provision. Um, I mean, the COVID period, it was miserable for most people, but if you were selling hardware, any cloud-based service into education, whatever, it was happy days. It really, really was. So I think that was a big push. It'd be interesting, actually. I'm going to have to put some feelers out, maybe get a survey done just to find out how many schools suddenly made the switch during that first 6 to 8 month period.
Well, I can actually give you some insight on that, because
Okay.
but there was a something called the Platform Provisioning Service that the government launched, the DfE launched. And, they it was basically for schools to be able to go to one of six companies who they'd onboarded and fast track them into using platforms such as Google or Microsoft. And I know for a fact for Concero, who were, schools were closed, people weren't going into them. They had, furloughed quite a few staff, but they kept a core staff. And I don't think it'd be lying to say that, it had a significant impact on keeping the company going. Was this platform provisioning service where they were actually the leaders in the UK in doing it, and they were going through hundreds of schools, putting them across to the cloud and creating classroom stuff now that Salamander does automatically, or Ladder else. But it was just that initial kick, like, okay, we want you to use online, but we don't have logins for you to do it or anything like that. So the DfE put on this platform provisioning service, which basically meant You can go, they'd go to schools, would go to webinars, and they'd be pointing in the direction of these companies who would then create that online tenancy for them and create the users on them so they could get onto it and use it um, in downtime. So there was some work to do there. And again, I think that was probably mainly primaries, although there was some secondary schools in there. And it certainly wasn't a full experience that they get. They did have that to get schools on quite quickly in that period.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of brings me on to another point. There is the kind of staff levels we have at schools since all this started, because IT staff were instrumental in doing this. I think during the lockdown period, they really did go out and work every hour God sent, and the amount of people on the site at the time just saying that they're almost burnt out by the end of it because it was constant, and because they were working from home, and still people had that assumption that just because it's 7 o'clock at night, you're working from home. Um, but yeah, it was a strange thing in schools. So schools, especially the ones that didn't have any IT, where it was just the ICT teacher, where they may have a few Archimedes and a couple of PCs in the classroom, all of a sudden they have to have a network manager, and maybe depending on the school, a technician, and then they had to find places to put them, and that was an amusing. I've got there's photos on the site from the early days because we went live in 2005 of people's offices were in toilets. I'm not
Yes.
joking. People's offices were in old toilets. They stripped out
No, I,
walls and everything. And
I yeah, I've seen the thread. I've posted on the thread. I think you're expecting your offices, and yeah, some of the places that people get put is crazy, isn't it? Am I right in thinking Bector used to give a guide to how many IT staff that you needed based on the size of the school? Is that right? And the pupils ratio?
it was the computer to pupil ratio. I think it was based on. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't think anybody ever went by that though, because I remember some people laughing about it because the school said they're not getting anybody else in. They're still
yeah. I think yeah, I want from the IT staff to give. I remember pushing it and saying, actually, I should have this amount of staff, and then yeah, the laughing back from the leadership saying, yeah, we should all have things, but we're not going to.
I mean, I have to admit, things have got better over the years as regards to that. And when my first school, I started in 2000, we had a single NT4 server, and it was Windows 98 on the desktops. And it was a horrible. Anybody who's ever worked with that setup, because they were all selling it back then. So you had an NT4 server, and if you're in a posh school, you got NT4 on the desktop. So it wasn't really worried. But the rest of us had Windows 98, which was, well, not exactly stable to say the best. And anybody who thinks that their software these days is not very good and have never used Windows 98, it's like you've really no idea what he's talking about there. And yeah, so and then it was a year later, yeah, when Microsoft released Windows 2000 and Active Directory, and that was when things started to get not easy but manageable. It was the first one in Lancashire to do it, and one of the first in the country. So I upgraded our entire network to Active Directory. And overnight, I remember I did it during the summer holidays, and I was getting congratulated by teaching staff after the summer, just saying how reliable things are and things don't break now. It's like, yeah, it was a hell of a migration though, and a hell of a learning curve because Active Directory is no small thing.
Hmm?
But I reckon my support calls went down at least 95%. And I didn't have to induce any black magic to make Windows 98 work anymore. And it's kind of been getting steadily better from there, I think, especially with Windows version. And then back to the cloud, you've got Azure, Intune, all these other products you can use to manage remote, set things up centrally. It's never been easier. Whereas before you would have to set up almost everything individually.
Do you think it's one of those seminal now? So we, the introduction of Active Directory, and now at this point where more and more schools are going to cloud. I don't know if there's any data around how many have and are managed from that, but I know just from a small sample, I'm decommissioning domain controllers and Active Directory. Enter. I appreciate Enter is based on the same technology, but it's definitely, I think, another sizable change now, isn't it? From going from those on-prem servers into the cloud servers and being managed in a different way.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those as well that A, you're not running a server 24/7, so you're saving on the electric bill there in itself. and the cost of replacement, repairs, parts, anything else that goes with having something physical, to having something that's, again, run and managed by somebody else, and it doesn't break. I mean, yeah, there's probably always going to be a need for a couple of, some servers in schools. A lot of schools use virtualization and things, and that was a great thing. Once they used disruptive technology, but it was a Brucey bonus technology. That was one that really helped everybody out, especially when storage area networks, SANs came online. If anybody's watching this that doesn't know what a SAN is, it's effectively a big square box full of hard drives, and you can divide it up into different drives and allocate it to different machines.
It's expensive. I'm carrying some around thinking, oh crikey, I'm carrying 25, 30K's worth of kit here in my. But
Yeah,
it's that works and failover clusters and Hyper-V and everything like that. They were a silent revolution, really, because the ability to segregate out your different servers, you didn't have to worry about buying one. And one of the big problems, I'm sure you already know this, is that if you're running your print server on a server that's also doing all the user documents and the print server messes up, then nobody can access the document.
yeah.
So, be able to print anyway. But that kind of silent transition that happened in the background and was led by the IT staff understanding their technology was really, really important as well, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that they really do look ahead as well, and that there is a thing as well in schools. I think this is the bit they hate the most, is that they're trying to plan for something that's stable, secure, and can be upgraded, maintained in the time that they've got to do it, especially when it comes to the installation side of things. Whereas, and I hate to say, a lot of the teaching staff are magpies and get attracted to the shiny at times. I'll give an
Yes.
example. I'll just say one word, and it's iPad.
I knew that was going to be the word that I would add. The amount of people with I am a staunch hater of iPads in education, a staunch of it, to the point where my advice to schools is, and I stand by this, it's not compatible with keeping children safe in education unless you're lying. It's as simple as that, because everybody seems to get around having monitoring on there and filtering. If they're logging in to the filtering for a specific browser, it will work. It's not a pretty situation to get into at all, but yes, you can do that. But you can't monitor an iPad. It's impossible, because if Apple let people monitor iPads, they wouldn't be able to sell them in business, in healthcare, and all these other industries where they can't say, oh yeah, but somebody can snoop on what you're doing. And so they get around it on the KCSIE. Sorry, this is a bugbear of mine. They get around it on the Keeping Children Safe in Education by saying a human can monitor it. Now, I've been in schools for 18, 19 years. Let me tell you, there is no human that is sitting in a classroom teaching a bunch of kids and actively monitoring at the same time everybody's screen, and then manually writing down any events that have happened in that lesson. Because if you've got devices, Chromebooks, PCs, even Android, and you've got the software on it, that's what it's doing. It's monitoring them all the time and reporting every particular thing. There is no way that a human can do the same thing. Therefore, they're riskier and they're not meeting keeping children safe in education, and they shouldn't be in those places. And I rest my case, Your Honour.
I think my biggest bugbear when they first came out was, and I remember that bet actually last year. It was one of the last ones they did at Olympia, and everyone's going, oh, the iPads are out, and they want to buy iPads, lots of iPads. It's like, well, who's going? Because they were effectively standalone devices. So you say you're going to buy 30 iPads, that's 30 individual devices that have got to be maintained individually. There was no centralized management for it back then, and there was nothing to run on them. Educational wise, there was very, very little out there. So people just wanted them to have them.
And educational wise, don't get me wrong, there's some fantastic apps, but they do a particular thing for one particular thing. I know you can get Office and everything on them, and there's an argument for one-to-one schemes. But if you've got a school full of devices, Chromebooks, Windows devices, is it cost effective or sensible to add in an entirely different system and management system for these devices? Is it beneficial? I struggle. it a lot.
Yeah, I remember I visited the ESSA Academy years ago, and they had iPod touches. All the pupils had an iPod touch, and I had an iPod touch at the time, and I'm like, and this sounds weird, and this might be an age thing now. Is to me, that's just a phone without the phone. And it's and people, especially people younger than me, which is a lot of people these days, is they use them in a completely different way to I use them. And it's one of those, again, we're getting into disruptive technologies. It's like social media. So if you're around when we were around when social media started, it was just a way of contacting people, staying in touch with people. And then kind of a new generation came onto it and it changed the way things were working. It was now pushing things. Whereas before it was about people talking to each other, it was now about trying to shout to a wider audience, I think. And it's yeah,
It's
social media's
it's the
a
difference between Friends Reunite and Facebook, isn't it?
yes, yeah. Well, that's what we all thought Facebook was going to turn into, is a Friends Reunited type affair. And I'm quite interested. The lady who actually founded Friends Reunited, she sold it a year before it went belly up, and she made a tidy amount on it, and good on her. But yeah, it's whoever bought it really didn't see the Facebook juggernaut coming down the road.
No, no, not. And I think that yeah, I think it's all related, isn't it? In terms of um, what is the user case for these devices in the school, and how has that evolved?
It's I know there's a lot of schools out there do now have iPads, and you can centrally manage them, and there are apps on there and educational apps. But it's been a long time coming. I mean, the original when I know the people I talk to, and it still sounds bad. Is just the schools wanted them because they were shiny. That was pretty much it. A use case now, you can come up with a usage case because they've got cameras on them, they're centrally managed. You've got the software now, you've got the monitoring software on them, and you can filter them. It's fine now, but originally at the beginning, and that was another point schools were making was we didn't have hardly any Wi-Fi. I mean, Wi-Fi has been one of those things as well that schools quite rightly have adopted and needed to adopt, but it's also like an additional cost because when any new technologies come along, and I've got a list here actually. So the ones that came up, say, from 2000 to 2010, so we had Wi-Fi, so like iPads, Wi-Fi, whiteboards and projectors, um, virtualization again, SANs and everything. Everything was expanding. Everything was getting a lot bigger, a lot more expensive, and you had to have this stuff at the end of the day. The kids' files were getting larger. You needed somewhere to put it. Just my first server, the first Viglin server we had, it was a 20 gig hard drive, and it was running NT4 server, Exchange 5.5, Microsoft proxy server. It was running a print server. It was running all the ClassLink stuff. So there was Net Support Manager was on there, and we had a few other pieces of software. And it was a single core Pentium 2, I think it was. Oof, yeah, it wasn't good. One of the things we did the year later was getting several new servers as well because that thing was good for nothing. Even at that stage, it was. But technology, and that was another problem we had as well, is technology was moving so fast in the late 90s, early 2000s. So even if you had a home computer and you're into gaming, you had to upgrade every 18 months so you couldn't stay current. One of the things I like now, and again, people talk about a lot, is the fact that a PC will last a good 6 years now. If you get a reasonable spec PC, it will do you for 6 years. Yeah, you may need to increase the RAM or get a bigger hard drive or whatever, but if it's for light stuff, browsing the web 6 years and you're done. Well, until they release Windows 11. And
Yeah,
again, this
convenient.
this disruptive stuff, yeah, all the schools are going. Yeah, brilliant. We got out of COVID. We've equipped the classrooms and they've budgeted for all of this stuff. And all of a sudden, they've got to replace something like 60% of their PCs or whatever it is, and laptops. And I mean, I can understand Microsoft's point and where they're coming from with why, and they needed the extra security and everything else. But a little bit of prior warning would have been nice, I think, like several years prior notice for a lot of organisations and schools.
It's an interesting one because I'm still that's one of the as you can imagine, working for an MSP, even if I was still working in a trust, it's a major thing on the horizon at the moment with this deadline, and there are lots of schools that are having to pay a lot of money to upgrade their kit to get there. And it I guess what it shows to me is a bit of the lack of the strategic side of we're still very reactive in school, in a lot of schools, where that okay, so it's been 4 5 years. I think Microsoft announcing that since they said, oh, Windows 10 is going to end of life, they did it when Windows 11 came out, but they also know the amount of time it went from XP to 7 and 7 to
Yes.
10. It's not an instant thing. That's why they offer the ESUs, the extended update licenses, because they know people aren't going to be able to do it. And I think the point of, schools have just come out of COVID in their timelines, and now they would have invested then or afterwards and gone, we need to do this, and now they're being hit with another thing. And it comes back to, if I was Microsoft, I'd be thinking, I just need to give them a little bit of time to really buy into what they can achieve now, because we've got some device, got some technology, and we just need people to use it for a little bit to understand it, explore it, get expertise in it, trust it. And it moves so fast, doesn't it? And Microsoft and AI, and Microsoft being so in, engrossed in AI now, compared to what they perhaps used to be, and making a difference. Everything's got to be AI now, and they could just give the schools some time to get onto cloud. And you mentioned about Wi-Fi before, and there are so many schools Wi-Fi that isn't great, and the fact that now that we're able to turn and say, okay, you don't need to replace your primary school server, and I often say, £7,000 to £8,000 every 3 to 4 years on one of them. If you're a secondary school, you can easily triple that, for what you're spending on that. Now's the time for schools to turn around and be able to reinvest that money into things like the Wi-Fi and the connectivity and the devices. But certainly the Wi-Fi and connectivity is really important. But unfortunately, it's now all going onto devices because of Windows 11.
Yes. Well, I know they've got the Connect the Classroom. I pulled up some stats for this as well.
Do
So,
you know that's been cancelled today?
sorry.
That's actually been cancelled today. The Connect the Classroom, the latest
Oh,
round of it. Old.
yes, I read about it. Somebody posted it up earlier. I did read about it, and I've been concentrating on my notes here. Yeah, it's they're giving it to schools, not the special measures, but that need improvement.
Yes,
Uh,
and I think they're called Rise schools or something like that. Right, the
they are,
Rise.
yeah, something like that. I can't remember the actual the meaning of the acronym there. But I know from the first batch of Connect the Classrooms, the schools were saying, right, we're getting X amount of money, but it's not enough to actually do the job. So if they say, right, because they set the spec, so it's AX Wi-Fi is the spec under the DFE set, which is fine. It's future proof. It's going to be the latest thing, but most of your laptops may not have it. But I think it's just for backbone. I mean, yeah, it's backwards compatible anyway. But yeah, a lot of members were saying, so if you were to put AX Wi-Fi over, you're going to have to change your wireless controller in your server room. Some of your network cabling may have to be upgraded. Your switches, if you need to put PoE switches in or something like that. It's it's I won't say half-hearted, but it's not well thought through, because you can only afford to upgrade half your network, and then you can't use the other half because it's not compatible with the new controller, because various manufacturers make it that way, and you can understand their points as well. Yeah, it's especially when it comes to planning in schools. When the point you made earlier, especially with Windows 11, was a lot of the network staff in schools do plan long term, and it's largely scuppered by the fact that suddenly the schools will reduce the IT budget one year if something else it needs spending on another area, and that's when it all starts to get squiffy, because you're then trying to roll your plan back another 12 months or whatever, while still trying to get the other side of the plan working. And the same story in schools anyway, there's never enough money. But especially with IT, it really does take a lot of forethought and planning.
Absolutely, and I think it's testament to the skills that a lot of people working in IT and education, a lot of your members have got, that they can keep these things going and meeting the needs for so long, and being pushed back year after year when it comes to funding, and there's not enough funding to pay for XYZ, so there's definitely no funding for the IT equipment. And some of the, the situations that you see people in and what they're making work is a testament to their skill set and to their determination and how much they care about the schools that they're supporting. But it is really unfortunate, isn't it? Because a lot of the benefits that we all know that IT can bring are there, but one of the big ones is saving money. So if you're not investing in it, you're not going to get those other savings out of it either. And I was going to say the term chicken and egg, but it's not even a chicken and egg situation. It is a known, provable fact. Invest in your IT, you'll be able to save money in other ways. You've just got to look at schools like Arbor and Bromcom. There's a school that I work with, Bourne in Harrow. They adopted Arbor. They saved £19,000 a year. Arbor listened to one of the podcasts that I had with their school business manager, Kirsten, who was on here. She could demonstrate it, and they've done a case study on it. That is just from using Arbor. They're also using things like Reading Coach from Microsoft. They're using Forms to a high degree. They're using Immersive Reader. They have easily the cost of a teacher a year, and everybody, that's just in monetary terms. Before you start looking at the gains in work-life balance, in retention, because all their staff have got a Surface device that they can access what they want when they want it. They've been able to invest in the Wi-Fi, they've invested in connectivity. It's a shame not many more schools are taking those big jumps. Some are, don't get me wrong, and it's as you say, every school's different, but there are still so many ways that we could save money if we invested. You've got to spend to survive it, and experience it. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, and we'll jump back in shortly, but I want to introduce the sponsors who make EdTech People possible. All are recognisable brands to anyone working in EdTech. Smoothall need no introduction to those working in schools, with 1 in 3 in the UK using their internet filtering, which provides real-time filtering wherever a user is and on any device. They also provide Smoothall Monitor, which is an essential safeguarding solution which allows monitoring of devices and captures for schools. You can find out more about Smoothall Filter and Smoothall Monitor and the other advice and support they've got available at smoothall.com. Next up, Secure Schools are an education-only cybersecurity team working to help schools understand the security within their schools and, crucially, provide support and training for those working within the school or trust. Recently, they have released their free Cyber School tool, allowing schools to assess their cybersecurity easily by answering key questions and getting a dashboard with all their results. Find out more by visiting their website at secureschools.com. First Pillar provide extensive support to schools in a wide range of areas. Their founder, Emma Gray, is an experienced school business leader who now works to support schools in all their operational needs, leaving them to focus on educating. You can see all the services that Emma offers at First Pillar and some great blog posts by visiting her website at firstpillar.co.uk.
Hello listeners of EdTech People, I'm Craig. When I worked in a school, I noticed how challenging it was for teachers to find and reserve shared spaces. That's why I created Classroom Bookings, an easy-to-use online room booking system. With Classroom Bookings, staff can reserve rooms at any time from anywhere. Designed for schools of all sizes, it supports multi-week timetables and flexible period times. Plus, the cloud service is priced at just £149 per year with no limit on the number of rooms or users. Try it free today or find out more at classroombookings.com.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, a lot of that stuff, especially at that scale, is top down. This is from senior leadership. These are like, this is what we want. How do we do it? And they go off to the IT team and say, well, how would you do this? They'll get back to the senior leadership. But it's them that can enforce it to the entire school. It's like, we are doing this. It will work. We've done the studies. We've done all the costings. It's just a case of getting everybody, and that's always been a problem as well, I think, is getting everybody on board with something when something's new. And I'm trying to think of an example now of a good one for that. I'm sure it'll come to me. But there has been many over the years. But yeah, it's got to be whole school driven, that kind of thing. It's not a case of the IT staff quietly talking to the birds and saying, well, we want to introduce this and it'll do that. It's got to be involving the entire school leadership team, all the IT staff and everybody.
But I think that's something that I want to ask you a bit more about. Really, is that evolution of the role in for IT leaders in school. You know, as the technology is involved and the usage is evolving as well, there is less servers for us to manage when we're network managers in a school. There is certainly, you know, less physical servers to manage. Is the role more strategic now, or do you need to be more strategic in the role than what you would have had to before?
I think possibly today you do need to be a bit more strategic, but as regards the role itself, I look at it, yes, you don't have a server now, but you're still managing something that's in the cloud. You know, so you are still doing things, you're just doing them remotely now. And there will be new things coming along shortly. I mean, one of the big ones in schools now is print management. You know, because schools are really, really aware now of how much printing costs, and it's not cheap. Some of the prices I remember in 2000, I think the school printing budget was £300. Guys were saying they were spending 10, 20k. I think, yeah, I think that was a low ball as well. I think some of them.
Yeah.
And there's always room there to make savings, I think. And if IT can help you make those savings, then so much the better. But yes, definitely print management, because everybody printed everything, even if it didn't require
Yes.
printing at all. I think one of the best things I ever saw, well, I think if they ever asked me what were your top 5 tech inventions, I think Save to PDF is going to be one of them. The person who came up with, why can't we just save to PDF? It was an open format anyway. Great, let's do it.
Yes. It's again, you can tie that back into the more devices you have and the more access to the devices, the less printing that you need to do. So it's almost a false economy for these schools that print everything, because actually if you're a doc cloud, you can share documents, you can access them anywhere on your device in front of you. So it's like that whole, well, you're probably wasting £20,000, as you say, as a very low ball. You know, it's into account paper, ongoing contracts, toners, management time, the tin to run, the paper cut or whatever it is, and the frustration that you get because they're MFPs and they never work, and the print never, I hate them. And if you just wipe that cost off, that could easily buy you, a new set of devices for, 30 devices or new staff devices, and give everybody a device, and then they will always want to print because they're teachers, and I love teachers, but they have an unhealthy obsession with printing that needs to be curbed, and they need to go on. Somebody needs to, do a scheme of counselling for them when we take away printers and stuff.
Oh, she's not going to make themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this will sort of like come on to the next bit that I wanted to mention as well, especially with regards to how security's changed in schools over the years. I mean, in the
Yes.
early days, again, we were being centrally filtered. Everybody had Sophos, and you had the client on the desktop. And in schools especially, I think our main focus was protecting the network from internal threats rather than external, because Windows wasn't very secure back then, and if a kid was smart enough and they knew what they were doing, they could potentially cause a lot of problems on the network. Whereas, and even then, over the years, I was going to move on to current threats and threat vectors and things. Well, the amount of schools getting hit, and they're not really being hit deliberately targeted. They're just part of a whole group that's being done at the moment, that's being hit, and especially now that AI's, again, I hate that phrase AI, because some of it's just a program sometimes. They've got very clever botnets now, AI controlled botnets, and they're relentless. Sean, our webmaster, he posted up on the site. When all the big stores were getting hit a few weeks ago, we were getting hit. Thankfully, we just migrated to a new platform, so we were a lot more secure than we may have been otherwise. They wouldn't have got in. We pay a lot of money for our security, but schools especially. And I was again talking to my business partner Sean. We were talking about him. Was it WannaCry? There was a really bad database virus that would go and wipe people's database out. It must have been about 2008, 2009, and I know Lancashire got hit hard because again it was click this link in an email, and that's pretty much how they still get in. I think the vast majority are human interaction for letting people inside the networks there, and that's always going to be a problem in schools. It's and gone are the days when you could back up your entire site on a 20 gig backup tape. So
it's I was on the so we had a really great podcast the other week with Tim Lime from Secure Schools, who getting this, and it's a great listen. But I was on the NAHT podcast, the National Association of Head Teachers. It's a union. I'm doing a lot of work through Consera, who I work for, with them, and trying to get across to leaders that is not just an IT problem. Because if it happens to IT, it becomes a leadership problem very, very quickly, because you're the ones who are going to have to go and talk to the parents and the powers that be about it. And the guy actually turned and said to me, so is it a problem, really? Is it a problem? I'm like, if you read the National Cybersecurity Centre guidance on it, and from the government have done studies on it, and there's a cyber security one with an education annex. Schools are hit and hit more than businesses when it comes to cyber security. Why? Old, out of date software, simple ways to get in, few people to target. So you school business manager, head teacher, once you're in, you've got access to everything that you need to do. They don't have dedicated cybersecurity experts. And even the skill set for many people in schools is you don't know what you don't know. And trying to be a cybersecurity expert on top of being everything else you expect to be in IT is asking. So you need some of that external resources, some of that external support for you to do it. But then we're going back to the whole conversation that there's no money to pay for it. So, it is. If I was still a network manager or a technician in the school, I don't think I'd ever been, when I was in there, as worried as what I would be now, as the potential for things to go askew, and the limited amount that potentially you can do to stop that. Because, as you say, you can put in all the technical stuff, but it just needs one person to make a mistake. I actually think it's such a scary and lonely time for them, because when the school gets hit and you're the network manager, that's a lot on you.
yeah, it's the Harris Federation, the Harris Academies Group. I posted up a link. It was on the BBC News the other week, and they basically
Right.
how they went through the entire process. The first one was they hired a hostage negotiator, and I thought that was brilliant. And they didn't pay. That is the big one. And obviously, there's no data out there on how many schools have paid or how many organisations have paid to get their data back, if you're even going to get your data back, because these are criminals at the end of the day. They could just be wanting the money, and then they will just disappear because it's Bitcoin and you can. But one of the things that it reminds me of, it was before COVID, one of our members' schools burnt down. It made the national news. It was a big one, but it's to do with backups, and it's a case of now I think the only thing that will save you or make you sleep easier at night is having an incredibly good backup strategy. And making sure everything is backed up correctly offsite via by whatever method you want, whether it's by a third-party company or you just having space somewhere and putting stuff in there. But you've got to make sure you can roll this back in as quickly as possible. But I think backups now is the only quick way to ensure that this can be done.
I'm with you 100%, and it's still scary how many schools that I speak to don't understand the difference between hot and cold backups, and air gap, and all those terms that. I remember being in a situation where I had a whole network failure, and it was a day before the Veeam license came through that I'd ordered, and so I didn't have Veeam. I only had a file level restore of it at the time, and I remember how that felt for me, sitting there being responsible for it and not being able to recover. We did get things back, but it took a long time. And I think I've ever since then I've said I'm anal about backups. I back up the backups and backups,
Yes.
back it up, and you cannot spend enough money on it at all.
No, you really can't. And I think it's one of those. It's like when you see people whose houses have been flooded out, and they go, "I've got no insurance because it was too expensive to insure my house by the river here." And it's like that with backups. For a good backup system, yes, it's not cheap, but wow, when you need it, and it's there.
Well, I liken it to the fire protection that schools have. They have to have fire protection in there. They have to have plans. They have to, when they're building, and they have to assess the risk. And you hope to God that you never have to use a fire extinguisher for anything other than powering your chair along the hall in the summer, right? You hope to God that sprinklers never turn on, and all the other things, but they're there because it might happen. Now, if you look at the numbers that are getting hit by cyber attacks versus the amount of schools that are burning down, you've got there's got to be something done to mandate certain things. And I know they're doing the DFE standards, and that's really important and really, really good, and actively involved with the DFE and pushing them, but it's still not enough.
Now, I, I suppose it's one of those where schools, it's where you've got to get across the schools is what is the most valuable thing in your school? It's your data.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's all your records, all your kids' courseworks, everything is there. And that's what they're after at the end of the day. And they don't want, well, in very few cases, they want your data. No, they just want to encrypt it and get your money.
yeah,
That's the game
yeah.
these days.
It's and as I say, my heart goes out to people in education that are trying to convince the powers that be in their schools around this. Sometimes I always joked, but actually I don't think it's that much of a joke anymore, that sometimes you have to pull the cable out so that they understand the impact of not having you there as a technical person. And there's always that old meme of everything's working. Why do we have IT? Why do we need them? Nothing's working. Why do we have IT in there as and and I do think there is something to be said sometimes for, and the NTSE do it in their exercise in the box. Have you thought about the impact of this? You're talking all the data, you're talking exam failures, you're talking, significant risks of harm from a safeguarding point of view, but you're also talking about parents that are going to lose trust. They're never going to use Arbor for parents, Bromcon for parents. They're never going to use Parent Pay. They're never going to use all those systems if you've been subject to a cyber attack. Why would they trust their kids' data in your systems if you can't keep them safe?
Absolutely, yeah. And I do believe actually the two big hacks with the co-op and I think Mark Spencer's, they were both engineer email,
Social engineering.
yeah, social,
Yeah,
yeah,
through third parties, which is obviously a huge risk in education, but also because I've been having this conversation at Consero around, it was via the help desk as well. So it was just people phoning up and asking to reset the passwords, and so hearing it, and that's how they got the access. So it doesn't matter what the school had put in, you could spend tens of thousands on firewalls, got a username and password, a legitimate username and password. So they're in your system. And I think big thing for Marks and Spencers, and this is all just from reading on the news and reading between the lines, is that they don't know how deep that access is in their system, so they're having to rebuild them from scratch, because they're hidden in there. So if they're worried if they restore it, it's hidden in there. And these schools who just do a nightly backup, you can restore the next day, but if they were in there 2 days ago,
yes,
they're in your backups, and you're going to be hit again and again and again.
Oh,
Then what?
yeah. Somebody had mentioned that on the site today, on Edugeek today, actually, about the fact that, yes, you got hit, but you don't know how long they've been in there. For your backups might be compromised as well. And that's the other thing is,
Exactly.
yeah,
But if you're a criminal and you're looking to make an impact, you don't their back to work. So that's the thing that you tried to get off there, isn't it? How, with your insight through the fantastic user base that you've got, how many members are you at these days on Edugeek?
14,000 now.
Wow. So that's an
Yeah, we upgraded the
threat.
site about 2 months back, and we're still in the process now because we have a lot of security work to do later on. It's mainly keeping people out rather than them getting in. No, nobody got in. Like I say, we've spent a lot of money on this, but I mean, traffic levels are getting back to normal now, and it's a surprising one. It's hard to get data when you run a website to actually get the feedback data because there's so many people using, and especially with schools as well. And this is a pain for us because it's hard to get feedback on how many schools are visiting because they're filtering will strip out analytics cookies, tracking cookies, any data that you want feedback, you don't get it. So Cloudflare is telling us we have 3 times our current recorded official statistics, which will put us over 20 million visits a year. But we can't declare that. We can only declare like 7.5 million. So yeah, it's going from strength to strength at the moment.
So what made you start that, and why do you still think it's getting that kind of impact from and still being used in such a way? Because forums are something that have tended to die out over time, but Edugeek's still there strong, isn't it?
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, it was when I was the systems manager at Lancashire Schools ICT Centre. I had an internal forum I ran, and that allowed me to speak to the schools directly. And it was a lot easier than sending out bulk emails, and everybody could chat and get to know each other. And it turned out to be a great little community. So I turned around to my bosses one day and I asked them, "Can we open this up to other regions?" And I was told that no, because people would object that we're paying for something someone else is going to use. So, right, okay. And I sat on the idea for about 12, 18 months. And my wife at the time, she was pregnant with our second child. She was going to bed at 7 o'clock each night, and I was getting bored. Right, I'll do this. I spent a day thinking of the name, registered it, downloaded some free online community software that was PHP BB based, set it up, and phoned a friend of mine. And I said, what do you think of this? And he went, oh, that's all right. And I said, should I take it down? He went, well, nobody's going to see it, will they? So oh, I'll take it down and work. And it went, nah, it's going to be invisible. And then somebody joined, and then 2 more people joined. And then I thought we'd get 200 people on there, maximum. 200 people would be a nice little hobby site on Fast Toast. And it just snowballed, I think. I think one of the reasons it did is the fact that, especially working in schools, it's different to working on the corporate side. As I say, especially back then, it was a case of you were trying to protect the inside of your network, not the inside from the outside, but just the inside of your network. And there's a lot of problems you get that you don't get in industry. And you're using, whereas industry, you tend to specialize a lot more. So you'll do email or databases or whatever, or networking. Whereas schools, you have to be the jack of all trades. And it shows in the amount of companies I get talking to me in the background, and they put listings up every now and again, who want people who've worked in the edtech sector because they've got a much more rounded knowledge. They may not be subject matter experts on a particular thing, but they have an overall more rounded approach and knowledge of systems, software, networking, and they can specialize from there. And we've still got a lot of members on the site who are now in the private sector, but they come in every day, and especially when people are talking about leaving. And we had a big one just before the Easter break in March, where lots of private schools suddenly shut the doors. And there's a few of our members there going, this was out of the blue. All of a sudden, they're looking for work. But frankly, I think people have pointed them in the right direction, and they should all be getting on well now. But it was literally the case of their schools slammed their doors at the end of the Easter holidays.
So you're coming up to a big anniversary, aren't you, for Edugeek?
Oh Oh yes, it's our 20th anniversary at the beginning of June. It kind of crept up on us because everybody forgets birthdays, and we are notorious for forgetting our own birthdays. So I've had this in the diary for ages. We're getting a lot of our sponsors involved. We're going to have a big competition. So individual sponsors will offer a prize, and people can go off to them and enter the competition. But yeah, it's 20 years. It really is a case of wow, where has the time gone?
Well, I mean, from a personal thing, it's actually a real honor to have a chat with you, because a lot of my days of working in education to being able to ask questions on Edugeek, and I will not be the only one who it's got out of trouble, and hasn't managed to get me out of the trouble. Sometimes it caused it if I follow some instructions that probably check. But even if it didn't give me the technical solution, it gave me the reassurance that I wasn't alone, and that there was this community of people who are there because they want other people to succeed. They want the industry to succeed. They want the schools to succeed, and they want to support people in there. And so, there's a huge personal gratitude for what you created and what you continue to create. And nowadays, it's such a big advocate for those working schools, a voice to companies and organizations and government. And, I know you've done things with Microsoft and Google and at that kind of level, as well as, and being that voice for everybody in there, and being listened to. And I hope you appreciate how big an impact that is and how important it is that continues. And I'm so glad to see. I went on there the other day, actually, and I was like, oh, this is a nice new look and new. And then I literally read a post on there. I was like, oh, this only happened last night. And I was like, oh, I hadn't looked at it for so long. And then I just happened to look on the day after you've done it. And I'm thinking, oh, Edugeek's still going strong. Yeah, this is really good. And I've been to the conference. I went to the conference up in Leeds, and good opportunities, chat with people. There's still friendships that were made on there that I still have to this day. So, I think it's so important what you do, and it's not just the pizza at Bet every year. It is the wider the role that you've got there. And it's been such a great chat, and we've touched on so many subjects and so many different areas. And I know we might have jumped. Is there anything you wanted to touch on just before we finish, or is there anything that we haven't talked about? Because I'm engrossed, and I'm hoping that
Thank you. Yeah, it has been a wonderful chat. I've enjoyed it immensely. But I did have some final notes. It said, well, what about the future? And it comes under, well, we've discussed them briefly already. And one is disruptive technologies, because nobody knows what the disruptive technology is until it appears. So I think that there will be something coming. I honestly thought, and I was a bit misguided, that 3D and 3D VR was going to be all the rage, and it's like, yeah, but it's really expensive and it's costly to develop software. And do you want nobody's going to be able to afford a classroom of VR headsets. So that didn't happen. It kind of died a slow death, which is a shame. I mean, it's still popular in the home, but as an educational tool, could have been great, but the prices just aren't going to support it. The other one was unknown security threats. Again, it's kind of disruptive technology things nobody knows, especially as regards to zero-day exploits and all the rest. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So if you've got the internet, you might be able to read on the BBC News or whatever about another company being taken down, or an ISP being taken down, or something like that. But nobody knows. But I think it's AI, and AI is the one that it kind of baffles me, because I approach AI, and I think this is saying when we're talking about the iPhones, it's just a phone that does extra bits and pieces, but younger generations do so much more with it. I mean, I barely use 5 apps on my phone. One of them is a weather app. But with AI, it's going to be a strange one. And I've talked to a lot of people about this and got their opinions, and I've got some really interesting thoughts on it. One of them was AI doesn't have a consequence, any concept of consequences. So if it gets something wrong, it's wrong. Also, AI can only know what it knows. It's going out. It can't think. Actually, I suppose somebody might correct me on this. It can't think out of the box. So say if you've got an IT problem, your Windows Server software is playing up, but you've got a couple of other packages running on the server, and you go, well, server's messing up, but it's got to be one of these. So you start to investigate other routes. I don't think AI is going to be that good at abstract thinking. And the other one is, well, it just annoys me when people, there's so much, what do they call it, slop now, AI slop. It could be YouTube content, articles in your newsfeed. My Google newsfeed has become unreadable, I think, in the past year because it's just clickbait and slop at the end of the day. But AI will be disruptive, but how it's going to get there, in what way, I think, is still going to be a little to be decided. I think they've invented a thing and don't know what it's for. They know what it's for, but we don't know what it's for yet because somebody is going to make that thing do something else, and it will be better than
It's
that.
it's an interesting one, and I'm actually with you on a lot of it. I delivered some training to school the other day about AI, and they turned around and said, "We want to know more about AI. Can you come give some training?" And I get there, and I'll be honest, I didn't actually use AI to do my presentation. And interestingly, today for the first time ever, brought a ChatGPT subscription, and very much like you, I'm I love technology, but I'm not a huge user and adopter of it in so many different areas. So it really got to have a benefit for me. I don't just go and do it for the sake of doing it. I don't just go and use it there. If I do, I have a look, say, oh yeah, it does that, and then delete the app off my phone afterwards. But a couple of really game-changing user cases that I've seen on it that I do think can make a difference. One is Notebook LM from Google. I'm not sure if you've seen this one, but Notebook LM is a place where teachers can go in and they can upload and link to different sources. So it could be they're going to do a lesson on Greek gods. There's a YouTube video that they've used. They've produced some PDF worksheets. There's a BBC Bite Size or something they do. They can go and put it all into their sources. They can then question that bank of data that they've supplied, and they can even get it to create a podcast with a conversation between two people talking about it and going over the key points, to the point where you can actually stop them and ask them a question, and then they'll pivot to what you're talking about, and it's one button to create worksheets, timeline, questions and answers.
Yeah.
For me, that is powerful, and I'm actually really surprised that it's a Google-led thing, because Microsoft over the last few years have been the ones that have been really investing in technology like Immersive Reader and other bits that they're giving out free. But it is incredible. I actually was at a chair of governors meeting last night. No, a governors meeting where I'm chair of governors for a school, and I had such a busy day, and I'm supposed to read all this paperwork, and I just didn't have a time to. So I uploaded all the resources that I had from it that had been sent to me, and I put it in, and I listened to a podcast on the way home summarizing everything that I needed to do. And when I got into the meeting, I asked it, what three things should I be questioning if my role was chair of governors? And it gave me the three questions. I think that ties into what you've talked about, because I put the content into there. I didn't find the content from elsewhere and trust that content. And I think huge things with trust, bias, that that's in there. As I told the trainer the other day, you put crap in, you get crap out. It's the same as it is with AI. You put crap in, you get crap out. And I'm excited about it. And but I don't think enough people know how it's going to work and how it's going to impact. And you see, like, you've got an AI kettle, an AI toothbrush, and all that. And it's not AI. But on the flip side, things that people don't know that are AI that are, for example, I think I'm right in saying this. When you're doing things like subtitles with live translation, that's artificial intelligence. That's taking my language and converting it to another one. You you're looking at the design tool in PowerPoint where it can just design you a slide. All these things that are already there, people aren't even using it. And then you're trying to sell them like, oh, you can create your own chat GPT, you can create your own co-pilot and all this. Actually, do you know how happy they were in that training when I showed them that PowerPoint will now design you the slides? It's the easiest training session you can do. You open up PowerPoint. I always put the ice cream in it, click the design tab, and I've got a designed thing. That's what education needs. That helps people content quickly and saves them time. That's what will be adopted. Not sticking the word AI in front of every bloody thing and saying, "Oh, go and do it." But disruptive technology for sure. But I hope it's not because it's crap. I hope it's going to be good.
Yes, I think as well, if you're there at the sort of the introduction of AI as we all are now, and you spent years, you know how to ask AI, you know how to give it instructions, tell it what you want, and get the output from it, or query and correct it. If you've never had to learn what we've had to learn over the years, and you're suddenly learning AI, and you go, make me a presentation, it it's not going to end well. I think people have got to be taught how to. What's the best way of putting this? How to? Sorry, it's a hard one to conceptualize. Basically, not how to get AI to do what you want, but how to get it to do what you want correctly.
And here's the thing, isn't it? If you use Edugeek as an example, okay, so today I had to create a script for creating users. I had a Excel spreadsheet, and I asked it to get the information out of the spreadsheet that I needed to create a script to run through and do what I wanted. So how would I have got that information beforehand? I probably would have put it on a post on somewhere like Edugeek. You're on Edugeek, you've got a bit of peer review there. Somebody might give you one option, and you go, "Oh, well, actually, I know that that's not a good idea." And then somebody else might come along and say, "That's not a good idea. Try this, or you could tweak this and get that better." You've got that experience. You've got that input from people who are looking, as you said earlier on, at something and seeing all the possible options and using all of their experience. AI doesn't have that. So when I ask it how to do it, it's set in its way of doing it. And if I want it to try and consider something, peer review itself, it isn't great at that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people, and I've done this as well. Actually, it can do reasonable code, but it still requires work afterwards. It won't work out of the box what it gives you unless it's something
Yeah.
very, very simple. So you still
Understand.
need the knowledge of what you were doing in the first one. It
Yes.
won't do things. It will do things for you, but only in a limited way.
If you give it the specific instructions, so if you don't know what you're asking for, that is a major barrier as well. And some people look at it and go, "Well, it will work what I'm asking for." It won't. If you go to it and say, "Make me a PowerShell script that does this," it's going to give you some good stuff because it knows all the PowerShell and you've given it what you want it to do. It won't be the only way to do it. As we know, there's millions of ways to do everything in IT.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I think lots of people are worried about their jobs when it comes to it. I actually think it's one of those few examples of where people working in IT can be sure that their jobs are going to be around because of AI, because they're going to need devices to run it on, and you're the one who can turn it off. So they need you to do it when the robots rise and take us over, and you've not said thank you to your AI bot. They'll come running back to us then, Chris. I tell you, they'll.
It's one of the things I had thought about earlier in the year, and it was a case of, well, and it's entirely feasible that in a few years' time or a couple of years' time, Microsoft will roll out a package that sits on Windows Server and it runs it for you. You just tell it what you want it to do. However, again, it has no concept of consequences. So if your server's got other software packages on there that may be problematical, it won't care about those. Whereas the human will go, how's this going to react with these packages? And you've got to look into that. Then you've got to research that side of things. But actually, I mean, I think it would be a great idea if you've got some kind of co-pilot for server, and you can tell it just to go off and do tasks.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
I don't think it's far off. I think some of the Azure stuff that's using it and take, when you're configuring some Azure stuff there, they're using AI to do it. If you can see in Power Automate as well, actually, where you use the tool and you build it, but you can refine it using the built-in Copilot. But it's all costing money, isn't it? It's all £250 a license or something to have the full Copilot in schools. But it was interesting the other day that they're now releasing it for children 13 and up to start using Copilot as well. So that would be quite interesting to see. And then I don't know if it's coincidence, but actually I saw it when I was doing the training. They've limited you to one image creation in a set period of time, which I never did before. I'm not sure if that's because they've just launched it to all these kids who are using it to create all these funky images or what. But yeah, very times. So I always ask two questions at the end of a podcast, and I'm going to put a rule on you that you can't talk about something that you've already talked about. So AI is out of the question for this. The question is, what thing are you glad that you'll never have to work with in a classroom again when it comes, or in a school-based IT? So what invention or thing that somebody turned around and told you that you needed to do, did you really never want to see in education again, or perhaps shouldn't have ever been there? And the second one is, what are you most excited about in the future? So it's a bit of yin and yang on these ones.
Yeah. Well, the first one will be Windows 98 or any pre-Windows NT, no, NT 2000 onwards. Brilliant. Windows 98 was utter. I spent so much time just and trying to explain to teaching staff that it is by its very nature an unreliable operating system. Yeah, they weren't happy. I think, yeah, Windows, out of all of it, Windows 98 caused me the most heartache. That and little Intel print servers. Back before printers were routinely networked, you had to buy those little blue boxes, Intel boxes that fell over every day. So
I think the news is I don't think either of those two are coming back. So I don't think we're going to have to fight.
No, thankfully. So what am I most excited for in the future? Well, I say excited. It's more hopeful. I want graphic cards prices to go down again. Intel's doing really well actually with their card. Technology-wise, school-wise, I don't know. I usually find old technology rather exciting. In some kind of way. I've got a house full of junk. I go to I've got the local auction house, and any old computers like interesting things that come up there, I will buy. I've got a G4 Mac Cube downstairs. I've still got to restore. But
I think a good answer though, just being excited about technology. Look at what's happened in the past and what could possibly be in the future.
Well, it's and also the other one is that unexpected discovery when you've been using the package for years and somebody goes, "Have you seen this?" And it's like a feature that's hidden behind something else, and it's like, "Oh my god, this just made such a difference," and nobody knew about it. Well, whoever did know about it hadn't told anybody else.
Yes, that is one of the nicest parts of my job is when I'm doing training, I'm like, "Do you know you could do this?" And then like, "You've just made my life a load easier." So yeah, no, I can really identify with both of those answers. Chris, it has an absolute delight to talk to you and get to know you a bit better and to delve into so many interesting areas. And this is a podcast I've ever done, and I'm
Blast, actually, yes, it has been great fun.
At all, because I know lots of people are going to really, really love this. And I'll just finish off with a huge congratulations on 20 years of Edugeek. It is a tremendous achievement, and thank you to everybody on there for all the support that they give each other and that part of the work that they're doing. And thank you for keep on going with it. And the team of moderators, I know it's all voluntary and to a team that gives that hard work. So thank you ever so much for that. But thank you for your insight and your candidness in the podcast. I've really, really appreciate it. Really, really enjoyed the chat. So thank you so much.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for having me on, Matthew. It's been really, really good. I have enjoyed it a lot. Yes.
Good.